Before we get started, I feel the need to make a quick note about Disney. The Disney company, through smaller subsidiary organizations, funded the election and re-election campaigns of several members of the Florida legislature who have gone on to craft the infamous Don't Say Gay bill. While Disney did eventually apologize for their part in helping this come about, have pledged to reassess their giving practices, and there's now even been reporting that behind the scenes the company was trying to dissuade legislators from passing the bill, I still feel the need to point this out, and it was all going on while Disney has been continuing to push to market harder and harder to LGBTQIA+ individuals and to present themselves as a corporation friendly to such people. While statements from the company are leaning in the right direction, I am waiting to see more concrete action from them before I stop putting this marker in front of things. You can see a link down in the description for my full videos on the topic. Well, I guess this is now officially a globe-trotting series. The third episode of Moon Knight, taking place in Egypt. And yeah, I'm still liking the show. Still liking it pretty well. I will say that I am finding myself zoning out a little bit during the action scenes. Not that they're bad. I think I might have even said this last time, but like, I know the action scenes are going to be good, but not amazing. And so I just kind of tune out a little bit. Certainly as far as the things that are appealing to me about the show and what I'm finding unique about it, the action scenes aren't really on the list at all. So, you know, when it gets into the action heavy moments, they're fine, but I check out slightly. I actually had a couple instances where I had to back it up a little bit because I realized I completely zoned out and suddenly like somebody was knocked down on the ground or something. I'm like, oh, I missed what happened. Okay. Part of it's ADHD. But anyways, so let's first start with the setting. Now, as I noted with the very first episode, they brought in a director who's actually from Egypt, who's directing, I think, 4 out of the 6 episodes, including this one, and who really wanted to bring a more complete and authentic sense of Egypt and Egyptian culture to this series then has usually been afforded by Hollywood productions. Now, I can't really speak to how well he does or doesn't do that. What I can say is I certainly appreciate that this gives you the view of Cairo as a modern, well, as a city with history, but also modern. So that, you know, you have things like the vendors in the streets and the, you know, in the stone alleyways that you kind of expect and have been seen in a lot of films. But then you get these big shots of these large buildings, these, you know, lit up in the night in a way that you just don't see depicted in films, as if Cairo is not allowed to move forward in time, despite the fact that it has. Time moves forward and modern amenities come in, even as the history is still standing right there. And I feel like it captured that well in a way that I, for one at least, have not really seen done in an American production, at least a, you know, mainstream American production. So that I just like seeing. This is the one where we kind of flip the dynamic of Mark and Steven on its head, because before we were primarily following Steven, with Mark interjecting occasionally, and when Mark would take over the body, the audience, along with Steven, would lose time. They flip that at the front end of this by having us initially with Mark and Steven being a somewhat intrusive voice, and at the points where Steven takes over, Mark and the audience lose time. I appreciate that. They didn't stick with that for the whole episode. Later on, you know, Steven takes over and we just kind of move forward with that. But it was kind of interesting to see it the other way, because it gives, I think, a good illustration of what is so frustrating about this setup for both of them, that, you know, to really get you a sense of the struggle that it is for them to try and share and cooperate. And also, you know, with Steven being like, no, I don't want you to kill people. And we also get a hint that there might be something else in there. I mean, it was hinted at by Harrow. I think I'm going to start remembering Ethan Hawke's character's name now. It was hinted by him that there might be other personalities, but we got a hint even earlier than that, because Mark gets control of the body again, sees that people have been killed, and Steven says he didn't do it. So we've got a seed laid for that. That'll presumably get paid off later. Again, I want to emphasize, I don't know that much about DID, dissociative identity disorder. I can't speak to how accurate or respectful, which are not necessarily the same things. I'll explain that in a second. This is or isn't. What I mean by distinguishing between respectful or accurate is like there's being just flat out textbook accurate, but then there's, taking certain liberties with the specifics, but still capturing the correct essence. That's often what I've had to settle for, like in a lot of queer representation for myself, whereas I hesitate to say that that's really accurate, at least to my experience, but it's still capturing something of the essence of it. And I've seen a lot of mixed reactions. I've seen some people say that, no, this really is not accurate at all. I've seen some people say, they kind of fudge it, but I feel like they kind of get, the core ideas. I'm not saying which it is, because again, I don't know. So when I talk about the struggle between Mark and Steven, I'm talking about it from a narrative and plot perspective, not as a representation perspective. That isn't to say that the representation element doesn't matter. It's only to say that I don't feel qualified to speak on that. So if you feel like I'm praising it, but you feel or you have experienced that to you this is disrespectful, understand I'm not disregarding that. I'm just not in a position to feel comfortable making that claim that it is or isn't. And so I'm strictly looking at narrative function and the characters as individuals. What I will say, though, that I do think is a positive thing, and I feel like I feel comfortable saying this regardless of my own level of specific knowledge, which is that it's a good thing that this pretty strongly established, maybe not definitively, but very, very, very strongly indicates that they're going with the idea that this system going on, Mark, Steven, whoever else might be in there, pre-existing. This predates Khonshu. And that Khonshu being involved in Mark's life and having him as his avatar was not the cause of any of this. That, I think, is important because something like DID, it's very easy for it to end up being effectively depicted in fiction, but also being attached to mystical, fantastical, supernatural, not reality. And given that, it is a condition that some people live with and that it is some people's reality, to constantly have it be like, oh, but it exists because of this made-up nonsense, diminishes the reality of other people's lived experiences. It's one of the reasons I have a lot of frustration with, I find this happens most in science fiction, where they don't really have queer characters, but they'll have alien characters who are coded as queer. You get this a lot with non-binary and gender fluid characters, that you'll get non-binary or gender fluid that's an alien, or it's an AI, or it's just something that isn't a human being, despite the fact that there are human beings who are non-binary or gender fluid. Hi, I exist, and it would be nice to be acknowledged as a human being and not some fantastical thing that isn't in the real world. So I do feel that this, almost regardless of how accurate the depiction of the condition is, I do feel that there is value in avoiding the standard trope of, oh, it's because of supernatural things. Because, again, that sort of, it makes something that is very real for people in the world into something unreal. And it contributes to the sense of feeling like nobody believes in your existence because you can't even find a representation of yourself in something that doesn't get couched in the fantastical. You're not allowed to just exist. So again, don't know how good or bad the actual representation of the condition is, but I do think that that specific aspect was how they should do it, and it's what they did. So there's that. Khonshu, I'm like, there's shades to Khonshu I'm really enjoying. I kind of like that he's obviously powerful. He obviously, he matters. But at the same time, he's certainly not all-knowing. he does seem out of his depth. And I like that even before he summons the other avatars for this trial of Harrow, that he basically says flat out, I have a bad idea. And it doesn't work. But normally, something like that with this whole, you do this and it fails this badly. Normally I'd have an issue, be like, well, why did you even try and do that? You made this big fuss in the chamber that like undermined your point, except Khonshu knows this is a game, knows this is probably not going to work, but tries it because they're running out of options. So that framing helps. And then with the thing towards the end of turning back the skies, which was a very cool effect, and getting the attention of the gods again and knowing he's going to be imprisoned, again, it feels like Khonshu has very firm belief that he knows what needs to be done, but he clearly doesn't always know the best way to do it. But he's still going to pick a path and storm down at bold as brass. And I kind of like that because, again, I can't speak to Egyptian mythology specifically, but I will say that in many pantheon-style religions, Greek, Roman, Norse, that kind of approach, like being dang certain in yourself and just barreling ahead, regardless of how well that would actually work, that is in line with a lot of depictions of these kinds of gods. Again, I can't speak to Egyptian gods specifically. I don't know enough about that culture or that mythology. But in general, a lot of pantheon-style gods, that feels like it fits. Another touch that I really liked about Harrow was that they're doing a real good job of keeping him very calm and sort of leaning on the power of that. And what I mean by that is, you take a scene like the trial, and you have Mark being, at points just flat out channeling Khonshu and shouting and yelling and having very little firm evidence, but just being passionate. And then you have Harrow next to him going, he's clearly unsettled. I'll tell you what's going on, and being calm. And there is power in that stillness. Because when the other person is just getting all worked up and you just stay calm, it grants you a level of authority that, if not always convincing of other people to see your perspective, at least makes people pause and consider you more than maybe they should. And there is a power in that. And I feel like the writing and the characters yielding the power of calm certainty very, very well. And in a way that also makes the character a bit unsettling, which he should be. I'm not sure I've got too many other thoughts other than that. We have I do. I liked this touch. So they have to find a sarcophagus and, get information on it. Very, very standard action adventure treasure hunty kind of thing. And these sorts of things in nearly every other sort of depiction would either be in a heavily guarded, museum, with high security, or still in a tomb somewhere. So the fact that it's definitely not in a tomb, but it's also not in a museum, it was sold on the black market by a guy who, while he's kind of a self-righteous, rich criminal type guy, also kind of has a point where, like, look, at least it stays here and it doesn't get carted off to who knows where. So like that was nice. That was, again, like sort of more considerate of the culture than either let's go raid a tomb or let's go to this museum that actually kind of stole it in the first dang place, but we'll never acknowledge that. So yeah, I thought that was a nice touch. This wasn't like an amazing episode. I thought it was good. It moved forward and continued down the path of the stuff that for me is still working. And there's just a lot of nice little touches along the way. It is, as it's going on, it does seem to have eased off the more supernatural tension and sort of scarier aspects that the first episode especially kind of started with. It seems to have completely backed off those, which is a little bit of a shame. I kind of wish that the series had lent into that a bit more, or at least for longer than it did. So that feels like a little bit of a lost opportunity, because that first episode especially, it really felt like something unique with the more supernatural horror aspects and the way they were presented, and most of that's gone now, and I am missing that a little bit. But I'm still excited to see the back half of this series, so we'll see how it goes. What'd you think of this episode? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. Patreon's how I pay the bills. It's how I'm able to do this as my living and get these out, well, in the case of something like this, same day that it airs, and all that stuff. So I appreciate any help you can give me, but even if you can't do that, the like, share, subscribe help me as well. Stuff to check out in the description, but don't worry too much about it. Take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break. And credits. I got to shout out my top Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Leotha Boy, TT, Vernobulax the Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspero, Adam Lefty Taylor, Shane Ross, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Couldn't do it without you.